Are you a
Buying
follower?
9, 8,
Okay, so we're gonna probably add.
Welcome to Gather Geeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. This episode is a Gather Geeks special sponsor edition. Here's your host, BizBash chairman and founder, David Adler.
We've all been there. We're starting a high-stress Zoom call, and your CEO or main speaker is on mute, and it all goes downhill from there. Isn't that embarrassing? Well, today, after a year of experimenting on great production values from your virtual events, you will hear how the big guys are doing it using the sophisticated sense of a high-end television studio in a very affordable green room program that was developed by Brand Live. Sam Kolbert-Hyle, the highly energetic CEO of the company Brand Live, will tell us how his company has helped major organizations add the right polish to their virtual and live presentations. In fact, my eyes opened widely when Sam told us how Brand Live picked up the Biden campaign after they had gotten criticism for a live streaming incident that involved geese and other noises who were making an appearance, and the opposition kept saying, if you can't do a live stream properly, how can you govern? So they hired Brand Live, and flawless execution for large events became the standard. This is that podcast that will be your insurance policy for your own events so that you can see all the pain points and hear about them so you don't have to experience them firsthand. Sam says, over-prepare the big production moments for better engagement. Never start your video on time because no one is really ready. And make sure that the most important part of the event is the takeoff. He deals with lots of high-powered clients who are producing these high-stress events and lives by the creed that calm is contagious, especially when the stakes are this high. So let's take a listen. So Sam, it's very interesting. I get calls all the time about all these new virtual platforms. And I got a call from you guys, and it was like, Brand Live, you're doing cool things. Once we started talking about it, the light bulb went off about what makes you different. You're this new centerpiece that everybody's asking for. Tell us a little bit about your journey to get to this point. It's only been a year, and you've moved mountains, and I'm actually very impressed. So tell us a little bit more about it.
We started to get a couple of requests from very large companies to help them elevate their Zoom meetings. Initially, the problem was really specific. They wanted to have a kind of TV-like experience, 2 people on the screen, 4 people on the panel, back to a one-person host. And they wanted to play a very nice marketing video in between some of those transitions. And in Zoom, it didn't look like $1 million. And so the initial request was simply, how do we create a TV-like experience that is in a browser, it's great for presenters, and we basically were deciding whether to take this on, whether to do this, whether to effectively become a service provider in some respects when we thought we were going to be a software company. So that's the beginning of the story.
Your green book, your concept, though, back in the back end of this system, had the beginnings of a very robust platform to make a theoretical Zoom meeting feel much more professional, especially when you're dealing with Fortune 500 companies.
Exactly. So these large companies have important meetings. They might do 95% of their meetings on Zoom or Teams or Google Meet, and that's great. But they have these marquee ones, the sales kickoff, the all-company, all-hands meeting, the all-company kickoff for the year, the investor relations call. And much of the core solution that we started to build right around this period was focused on helping these types of meetings become that much better, just a little bit different. So it didn't look like Zoom with lipstick, but something much, much more significant that you'd broadcast on a big screen studio type of experience.
Yeah, and me, I was a former head of corporate communications for a Fortune 500 company for Prime Media and Macmillan, and we would have had a heart attack if the chairman of the company forgot to unmute himself. Then he was dealing with all of the boxes all over, and it's just something that you don't do if you're dealing at that level.
We started to basically create, a physical studio space in Portland where we are, And it required essentially a computer for every presenter. So we would have a master computer with a background and a logo and create a canvas. We were using off-the-shelf software to handle that, OBS and Wirecast if you're in this space. And then we had a computer effectively for each presenter. Now, it worked great when there were 2 people or 3 people. No big deal. 4 computers, 3 for the presenters, 1 for the streaming and the canvas creation. But our large companies, they keep pushing for more. And so it turned into a 6-person panel. It turned into a 12-person cheers at the end. And so what we struggled with during the first month of this process is that it required a computer for every person. We're seeing more and more people. The internet at the producer's location, super important. The internet at the presenter's location, equally important. They're trying to share slides. They're blurry. So we solved that problem by saying, okay, we'll drive the slides for you. And then every three minutes, it's next slide, and they get annoyed with that. 30% of the people, to your point, started on mute because that's just the phrase of 2020. You're on mute.
You're on mute. Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're like, this is really interesting. We have everything that it takes to create a TV-like experience, but it is hard. It requires all these people. It requires all these computers. What if there was a way to create software in a browser that basically solved the same problems that we were experiencing as effectively the sole client? And we went out to try to figure out if there was other solutions that we could white label or partner with. And we found that the market was concentrated with people that were mostly focused on hobby streaming. 2 people going live to Twitter, 2 people going live to LinkedIn, where one of the 2 people going live is actually producing the show. And we're coming from a world far more sophisticated, where you might have 15 people as part of an events team who want to be part of the green room, who want to be part of the process, plus the presenters, and you could have 40 people in any given show. And it's not designed for 2 people on the screen. So we basically spent the month of May, right, getting our first version of the green room out, getting the product launched. I think the shows were fairly average, and we're learning a lot, figuring it out, but totally imperfect. And it was right around this period where we got a call from the Biden campaign because they were struggling with the exact same thing. They were trying to produce content with a virtual producer and virtual presenters, and super susceptible to the internet, super susceptible to the hardware of the computer, super susceptible to the presenters being able to use the technology. And I think initially, if I had to take myself back to May of 2020, there was a much more significant issue affecting the campaign. As you recall, he had just won the primary, so he was the presumptive nominee, and the Republicans were amping up their attacks on him. And I remember the first set of conversations around the Biden campaign was very focused on this idea of recreating the rope line. He is someone who is very focused on like personal connection. That's a big part of his story. It's a big part of what makes him unique, his empathy, his ability to connect with someone, especially in times of hardship. And he was missing that without being able to campaign. And the event that they had done before they called us, there was a very famous, celebrated incident where he's at his house in Delaware, and instead of the basement concept hadn't even started at that point, but they were filming outdoors, and he has a pond, and there was a geese incident where there's like all these geese that were messing up with the live stream. And the Republicans took hold of this, and they put this narrative out into the wild, no pun intended, that if you can't live stream, how in the world can you be president? And so when they called us, I hate to say it, but the stakes were much higher than it might seem, because being able to live stream successfully was had become a proxy for your ability to govern. So it was a pretty dire situation for them. And honestly, the reason why I think we became a good partner for them, and the person that they picked, is because we were going through the same challenges they were. We were going through, how do we produce really high-end content across 5 to 20 people for a 1 to 2 hour show? Like, how do we do this? And I think our ability to feel their pain, to be an expert, gave us the opportunity to win the account. We also had just done some of the largest streams on the internet at that point. We had a very large client who had 100,000 people on a 4-day event the previous weekend. And pre-pandemic, the largest event BrandLife had ever done was 8,000 people. And now we're able to confidently say, hey, we just did an event for 100,000. So I think the combination of those two things won the account, to answer your question specifically.
And what is it about? What do people, if you're an organizer, what should you be asking you to make sure you can handle that type of bandwidth and things like that? What are the things that someone listening here would say, oh my God, I've got to have this problem? I don't even know what to ask.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. The event space is fairly fragmented, and most events are small. And I think one of the reasons why we've been so successful over the last year is because we figured out how to handle large events really well. Most people join a large event between 3 minutes before and the 5 minutes after the event. So there's 8 minutes there where you have a fairly natural bell curve where most people are joining the event. And so as a software provider, it's really important that you can handle huge spikes of traffic. So because of the Biden campaign, we had to spend millions of dollars into scalability and infrastructure so that we could handle 10,000 people per, in some cases, minute. The tool today can scale up to 4 million people joining an event at a particular time. But the conference world's different because you have people like logging in over different time periods. But for live events where you have big audiences, they all join really in a tight window. So as an example, to answer your question, we recommend that people generally start their shows about 5 minutes late. And it's tough to do that as an organizer because you're like, oh, you got to start on time. But people aren't joining on time. So starting on time may mean starting 5 minutes late. So it's those types of things that I think we've figured out and learned over time. But the large event spikes are what's so hard, and being able to handle that at the same time.
What is the question that an event organizer should be asking you to make sure that doesn't happen for them? What are you asking? You're asking about the spikes? Are you asking about the technology? You're asking, do you have this X piece of equipment? What is the sort of like question that we should be asking?
Sure. So it depends on the size of your event, but I would say that the things you want to ask your vendor are, give me a copy of your last load test. How many people can you scale to? Can you handle the size of audience that I'm expecting for my event? And when was the last time you did an event of this size? I think those are the good questions to ask. I think a lot of the time vendors will be focused on the totality of the audience over a period of time. So you really need to be on that surge at the start of an event. And a lot of vendors paper over that because they're focused more on, like, oh, we did this event over a 5-hour, 2-week period. It's very different.
Right. How do you answer the question now that it's asked?
Yeah.
Like, we have X in order to accomplish your goal. What is that? What did you spend that $1 million on?
Yeah. So we had to build auto scaling technology so that if you had 10,000 people per minute or 100,000 people per minute, you could spin up other servers in real time to make sure everyone gets through. We also put a lot of energy and resources into the what ifs. I call it the what ifs, like what if something happens? And so we have a ton of technology that's built in to the platform to ensure that we can react if something happens, whether it's a troll getting into the event and they shouldn't be, and they're on the chat stream. We have tools to shut the chat down, to moderate the activity in the event so it doesn't ruin the event. We have a ton of backup, both plans and strategies to ensure that if there's a failure point here, we can replace it in real time and the attendees don't notice the difference. We have real-time technology to change the page without requiring a refresh. So if something happens in a particular section or there needs to be an edit to the text because maybe the directions you're giving somebody about when to join the breakout session is wrong, we now have new technology because of the Biden campaign to adjust that text in real time without having to require someone to refresh their page. So a lot of the technology, aside from the security elements, which were very important, and the auto scaling elements, which were very important, is really like how we think about the problem if something bad happens. Does that make sense? And I'll give you one more example.
That makes sense. The question I have is, okay, so you're the guy running for president of the United States. You're sitting in your house and your internet sucks. How do you solve for that?
So in the green room, for example, we have a safety photo. So the safety photo comes on the screen. I can show you right here. I turn, basically, if I have bad internet, it goes like this. So a lot of the times,
Talk about it since we're on audio.
yeah,
Describe what that is. There's a very cute child in a picture here.
That's my almost 5-year-old son, and he looks like he's about 2. So
He's adorable.
Yeah, I look a lot younger than I am now. Anyway, the point is, sometimes when when video is bad, it goes to a black box. And so we've built in technology to be intelligent. If the stream looks like it's a low quality, we can automatically turn the camera off and show what I call a safety photo, which is a very nice photo. You see this on TV when you have someone calling in. Remember, Donald Trump used to call in and you'd see the picture of Donald Trump, right? So this is what we've built to solve for that problem. The production side of the green room, which I'm logged in currently, has actually stream health. So I can see that you're at a very nice, healthy level, David. But I have my camera turned off, so I'm not. So we've built in a ton of tools to solve for that particular problem. At the end of the day, though, if the internet quality of the presenter is really bad, a lot of the time we have to just handle that post-production. And we have a video editor that will allow a customer to potentially take that black box and superimpose an image on it to make the event, especially for people watching after the fact, because a lot of our customers, it's not just the live portion. A large percentage of the attendance actually happens after the event. And so we have tools to fix some of that stuff so that the recording, when posted 5, 10, 15 minutes after the event, looks much better.
So what happens when the audio goes bad on the presenter side? Do you have the same type of thing on the audio piece? How you get that reverberation sometimes, that's just a problem that you can't really solve for, it sounds like.
Yeah, the audio piece is a little bit trickier. It's if your audio and your internet are bad on the presenter side, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard. That's why
What is good for everyone out listening? What is a good internet solution? I have a terabyte of Verizon in my house, but when I was living in the country last summer in Rappahannock, Virginia, I had satellite and it was terrible. Is that kind of the bane of your existence when people live in these rural areas and the internet's not great?
The last year's just been crazy. We've done so many shows with celebrities and they have terrible internet half the time. It's been really interesting. There's not a lot you can do. The one thing that is hard about producing live events, especially if you have remote presenters, is that you're susceptible to the internet of the presenter. And so we recommend, obviously, hard coding or hard wiring in your laptop, being as close to the router as possible, making sure your computer has one Chrome tab open, because Chrome is a major suck, and just ensuring that you have a newer computer. I can't tell you that most of the problems are related to the quality of the internet and the quality of the computer of the person.
So have you had to walk through celebrities, talk them through? Like just last night, I was at a book party with a whole bunch of Washington celebrities, and of course nobody could figure out how to do certain things, and so we had 50 superstar celebrities trying to convince this one person how to get off put their internet on or something. It was pretty funny. You must have a million stories about that.
Here's the deal. Most events, most shows, we strongly encourage at least 2 pre-run throughs. Usually there's a tech check to make sure that you know how to get into the green room and the technology works. And then there's often a rehearsal. It's usually a dress rehearsal. And then there's the show. Strangely, celebrities, they don't really like to do those first 2. And often they often have, I don't want to say, what would be the right word? An assistant, whatever the word is. Yeah, a stand-in. A handler is probably a bad term, but you get the point. And so often during the tech check and the rehearsal, it's not the celebrity themselves, it's their associate. And so, yeah, it can be a little chaotic in the moments before you go live if someone's joining for the first time and not comfortable with the experience. We've tried to make it as simple as possible and dumb it down as simple as possible. I'll give you 2 examples. Initially, we had pretty significant, for security reasons, we had basically a requirement that a producer could let someone into the room. We had to make sure that the links that were being sent out via emails were specific to the right people, and we had the right process in place to ensure that the person who owned that email address was the person. When we got into dealing with more sophisticated shows with celebrities, as an example, it's not their email address sometimes. It's the person who created the account for them. And so we had to rethink that about halfway through last year as we started to do pretty much every major virtual fundraiser for the Democratic Party. And the people joining our product were as famous as you get. Because the email addresses were not theirs and the authentication process was complicated. So we completely rethought that. We really simplified the way you get into the green room, because that's the hardest part of, it's like a takeoff and a landing concept, where those are the most risky parts of a flight. That's the most risky part of a show.
Were there any key learnings that you did in terms of the whole password and email situation that you can help everybody with? In terms of
now we just let people into the green room as long as they have the right link. The links are very specific to the people. But we security is such a big part of what we were building last year that there's definitely a balance between being super secure and making sure that people can get in seamlessly to the show without it being like 3 minutes before start time. But yeah, celebrity wise, we had pretty much anyone you can imagine if they were part of the process last year, and whether it's Whoopi Goldberg or Julie, oh my God, I'm blanking on her name.
Louis-Dreyfus.
Exactly. We got her in successfally. Yeah. Took a little bit of extra effort.
How do you coach these people? The one thing that I know when I do a lot of these virtual events and I'm speaking, I'm keynoting and things like that, is there's no feedback whatsoever. So it's like, how do you get the emotion from it? How do you coach these people to do better presentations because they're on this platform? There may be thousands of people listening, but they don't feel it.
Yeah, that's actually an area we're investing a lot in the next 6 months. We have a ton of new ideas about ways to bring the event audio experience into the green room, whether it's cheering or clapping or just the emotion that happens from the attendees as they're watching the presentation. So stay tuned for more on that. But I think generally speaking, what we've tried to do in the last 6 months or the last 12 months is create connections into the chat that happens on the side of the video player in the attendee experience. So you can see it because you're in here, but if you tab over to the chat, you can see that there's a moderated comments and questions section, so that someone who's presenting, especially if they have slides or they're doing a keynote spotlight 10-minute presentation, if there's a lot of engagement on the event attendee side where people are saying this is amazing, or I really like this, or maybe someone has a question that's a reasonable, meaningful question, we actually can put that directly into the green room so they can see it, they can react to it, they can adjust. And that feature has been really valued, especially in content heavy presentations where someone is feeling the benefit of the unscriptedness. And I think to your point, like that's the hard part about live events, is it either feels pre-recorded and scripted, or if it's purely live, as you explained, there's not a way to get a feedback loop from the audience. And this feature that we built was intended to do just that, and people love it.
Do you see that I think this is so brilliantly created, in my opinion, that it's going to have some implications in live event eventually, that this is going to be the portable green room that people are going to have for producing live events. It seems like a natural, and it seems like it's a much more efficient approach. Are you thinking about live? You're calling yourself Brand Live, so live in terms of actually physical presence. There seems like a lot of applications for this approach.
Yeah, one of the things Brand Live does is that our focus is not always about us. I know it sounds a little crazy, but
God forbid.
For example, the Joe Biden campaign, it was live at joebiden.com. Most of our clients, a lot of them, are powering their events in a way where Brand Live isn't front and center. Like you don't even know we exist in some respects, right? Because the domain people are going to is not all about Brand Live. One of the things that we have is we have really rich, deep relationships with very high-end production agencies. They're some of our biggest customers. We have about 30, 35 of those, and they do hundreds of events with us over the year. We have been working collaboratively with them over the last 3 months to develop features into the green room that are perfect for on-site recording experiences. So for example, if you look, you can't see it because you're a presenter, but as a producer, I can take this screen that we're looking at right now, and I can put it on a comfort monitor at a stage, whether that's Moscone Center in San Francisco or the Staples Center in Los Angeles, and you could do a live fireside chat on the stage with the CEO and a special guest, Tony Robbins, and you could pull in via a remote presentation through the green room, a third presenter. Maybe it's Mark Benioff. And because the green room has a feature in it, which we call what do we call this thing? It's basically a link that allows you to put the green room on a TV screen. Now, the CEO interviewing Tony Robbins can have a three-way chat where one of the three people is not physically in the same place. And that is what we've been testing the last couple of months. It's super powerful. It's all real time. And we are of the view that because we're so focused on company communications and company meetings and the marquee ones, that in our future view, there's going to be a ton of these types of experiences where the recordings are happening at the headquarters of the company, at a sound studio, at a really fancy place with a production agency, but they're going to want to bring in guests for some of their sets, some of their panels who aren't there because they can't fly out to Los Angeles or Portland. And so this kind of hybrid state for us is less around like the attendee experience and more around how we create the high-end production quality, TV quality content and do it in a meaningful way, because we think that a lot of the content, at least for our more high-end customers, are going to be filmed in a physical location. The audience might not be there, but the filming will certainly be more and more on site.
So it feels like you're in a theatrical situation as opposed to a Zoom call where your people are just coming in from their living rooms all over the place.
Nice cameras, nice lights, nice set design. It's a critical part of it. And the presenter who is coming in remotely might look like what you're comfortable with on Zoom or on a CNN broadcast. But we think that our largest accounts are starting to think about these problem sets and think about the future this way. The attendees, they're not going to be there, though. The attendees are largely going to be 80% virtual, we think. But the filming and the talent is going to be a combination of on-site recordings that are live and on-site recordings that are pre-recorded.
Because I know a lot of production companies are spending gazillions of dollars doing this by hand.
Totally.
Right now. And the costs are prohibitive. The way that I see this technology is scaling it in a way. And it reminds me, we talk about my favorite new video production thing is Descript. And you're like the Descript for producing great content at high quality value. And the fact is, in Descript, you can just edit with word processing. You're making it so that you're making this high powered production studio, making it virtual in many cases. It seems that, am I correct in that sort of assumption?
100%. We've built this kind of by accident based on what customers have asked for as we've built the rocket ship. And so a lot of what we built was not the original thesis. A lot of what we built is just what happened over the last 6 to 12 months. When we first built the green room, we didn't think that a super large percentage of our customers were going to want to pre-record half the content. But most of our customers work for large companies, and most of the people who work at large companies, they're not necessarily the boss, and they want it to be perfect. And I think it's reasonable, and I can empathize with that. And so we have a lot of our events-oriented customers who started to say to us, I think this is great, but I'm a little nervous that if we do it all live, it's going to be imperfect. And so we started to get requests back in September to pre-record the rehearsal, which at the time was fine, wasn't a big deal. We have local recording, and we can do that. And so we started to do more in those, and as soon as we started to do more in those, people started to tell their friends, and oh, this was great. We did some live, we did some pre-recorded. And then we started to get more significant requests where people wanted to schedule out 10 recording sessions and record each shot one by one. So if you had a CEO communicating, you would have a one-up. If you had a 2-person interview, it would be 2 people. If you went to a 3-person panel, it would be a 3-person. They would record them separately as opposed to recording them together. And we're like, okay, that may be a little bit more work. So the next phase of our green room technology is very focused on it being a really powerful recording tool set for people to create amazing content that looks like $1 million. And I think that's our worldview, if you look at the data across we have the benefit of being able to help clients record content in the green room with this other incredible benefit of having all the data from the events, if that makes any sense. And if you look at the data from the events, 60% of people consume these events on their phones or possibly an iPad. And every client that we talk to, almost all of them, they tell us as part of the sales process, as we start to tease out the specifics of the event they're planning, they tell us almost everyone's going to watch on their computer. Everyone's going to watch on a MacBook Pro because people think that people are going to do what they do. I thought this too. This was my original thesis. If you look at the data, 60% are watching on their phone. For some of our clients, it's 70-30. So because of that, the experience on the phone is very different than the desktop. As an attendee, when you're going to an event, you hit the play button, and what does it do? It goes full screen. So our thesis is as more and more people are watching on their phones because they're busy, these people aren't on the go. They're watching on their phones because they're trying to multitask. They want to be able to walk over to the coffee machine and make a coffee. They want to walk upstairs and do their laundry, or downstairs, wherever your laundry machine is. So our thesis is the world opens up as things return to normal. People are going to be busier. They're going to be They're going to be preoccupied with other things. The idea of the content being the centerpiece is so much more important because you hit play and you go full screen on your phone.
So what do you learn, like when you're shooting a principal and you're going to see them on the iPhone? Does that mean do less panels because it's going to be too tiny? How does that translate into a better user experience?
I honestly think it creates a better experience for the attendee because it's just the content. And so I guess to reframe the question, what would you do as an event organizer to contemplate that people might be watching full screen on their phone? And I think that the answer I would give is you should be investing heavily into the production value of your content, not the stuff around the video player, like the chat and the engagement and all that stuff. Like it's great, but it's not what people remember. People remember the content. People remember how they felt when they watched something powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to go down to Maya Angelou again.
Yeah.
But the thing is that on that content, is it the crispness of the screen? Is it the power of the audio? Is it the content that's being written? Is it all of the above? Or is it, and also what gets in the way that you notice immediately when it's not right?
We talk to clients about it is over prepare the high production moments. So instead of doing I'm going to go live with one person and going to a 2-up and then going to a 3-up as like a live panel concept that feels much more like Zoom, maybe have the CEO be introduced with a highly produced video with walk-up music, and really maybe even start with YouTube clip from a famous movie or something to really make it feel special. As you transition between sets, play some of your marketing videos, introduce products with extra footage so that there's a mix of highly produced, clearly pre-recorded content and the live components. And I think thematically, the best events that we've seen are the ones that had a consistent theme throughout. The background was consistent. The titles looked really nice. The lower thirds were exceptional. The video content was produced for that event. So you had an intro, the stream will start in 10 minutes, that was themed with the background and themed with the water break moment and themed with the thank you for attending slide.
Wait, what is a water break moment?
Water break moment is a nicer way of saying a potty break moment, which is
okay.
Yeah, which is basically bio break.
Oh, bio. Okay, I was learning what this is something I never heard of, or it was simpler than that.
People have a tough time. People have a tough time with more than an hour, so we encourage a bio break at the midpoint.
Let's go into a couple of the key things. What you're learning, what you're saying that you're just saying off the cuff, are key learnings that everybody can benefit from. And one of the things is you talked about never start on time was not necessarily just a technical thing, but it's a reality piece, right?
My recommendation is always start like 3 to 5 minutes late. Everyone wants to start on time though, every organizer, because they get a lot of pressure internally about that concept. There are also loud factions who get really anxious if you don't start on time. So sometimes the chat, especially if you have a large event, starts to be like, okay, what's going on? I can tell you the Biden campaign started most of theirs 20 minutes late. And it was totally fine. No one really cared.
Well, you also talk about the video loop during the wait could be more important than anything else.
I'll give you an example. The hardest part of these things is the takeoff. And so it's possible you have some issue with a presenter, they're having some difficulty, and it's very common to be a couple of minutes late when you're starting a show. The one thing that we've found is, and we use internally a phrase that we call calm is contagious, which derives from, I think, a Navy SEALs message, which is basically the idea that how you handle these moments, that 1 or 2 minutes being late, extends to everyone who's participating as part of the process. So the idea is calm is contagious, so that it helps create calm amongst the organizers and the presenters and obviously the attendees as well. It's one of those interesting sayings that it's called the fill in the blank saying. So it's calm is contagious, but it could be also filled in with panic is contagious. And so when these things happen, we strongly advise that people take a deep breath, don't panic. It's far worse to an experience to put a hold slide up that says we're having technical difficulties, we'll be there shortly, because most people don't even know the difference. So that was happening from time to time. People would be 5 minutes late. They'd be freaked out that they're 5 minutes late. And they would put up a slide that says, oh, we're having trouble, we'll be there in 5 minutes. No one on the attendee side cares, but it creates this feeling of panic that extends to the audience as well. So those are little examples, but I do think, yeah.
You also talked about how you said that the takeoff is the hardest part, and you have a lot of advice in the fact is, how do you actually start it off? Is there a voiceover guy, or is there a host in many cases? Like, what works the best? And also go into what is the feeling that you want right from the start, and how did that you said it's contagious or it's calm, that drives everything.
So there's a couple concepts here that I think are important. We've found that the best experiences have what we call pre-stream media. So the 10 minutes before the shows start, you play a loopable video, often with music, to set the tone. It's loopable because if for some reason you're running 3 minutes late or 5 minutes late, it just continues to play and no one knows the difference. So you don't need to put the hold slide up that says we're running late, because your media has started 10 minutes before the show. And if it goes 12 minutes or 14 minutes, it's just no big deal. So that would be a strong recommendation. I think music sets the tone. It sets the expectation, of course, that the stream is live, which is different than when you come to a page and it's like the stream will start shortly. It's not as interesting. But as you introduce the first person, I've found that the best shows use a video clip or some sort of intro clip. Now, that could be a pop culture reference. It could be the theme that's been created for the event. That's 30 seconds or 60 seconds. It often includes what I call walk-up music and a title card. So it would be like, now welcome to the stage, Sam Kolbert-Hyle from Brand Live. And that's built into that first video experience rather than a voice of God. I find that to be a little less interesting. And so if you invest properly in these tools and you create a 1 minute or 2 minute intro video, it goes a long way. To your point on the quality of the first five, we have another saying, which is the first 5 seconds sets the tone for each presenter. And there's 2 components to this. It's really important that they start off on a good foot, because if they do, then they're confident. They feel good about it. They think they're doing a good job. You're not in a room with an audience, so you don't have that feedback loop. And so it's hard to present in a vacuum. It's hard to present not knowing how you're doing. It's hard to talk without being able to make eye contact with the people in the audience to see how they're connecting with you. And so what happens is, if you start off poorly, you're gutted, you're devastated. You're like, this is not going well. And then it gets in your head and it's self-reinforcing. And so the first 5 seconds, we tell people in rehearsals, we tell people in tech checks, the first 5 seconds is really important. Smile, look at the camera. See, I'm looking at you. I'm not looking at the camera. That's a big thing we have in our technology. Look in the camera. It makes a big difference. The camera is not the canvas. So it's really hard, especially if you have a nice camera like I have here that's above the screen, to stay focused on that. But it does make a big difference. And I think the other thing that we found as it relates to that first 5 seconds is that's that critical point where you as a presenter feel comfortable in a medium that feels uncomfortable. And so if you nail that takeoff, then you generally do pretty well the rest of the set. And conversely, if you struggle on the takeoff, it can be quite devastating for the quality of that next 20 minutes.
How do you recover? I used to be really nervous on stage and all that stuff, and now I'm not. But I remember when it goes off the rails, you start sweating. You can actually visually see somebody that are like dying up there. What do? You just have to let it happen.
We actually, that's good. This is obviously a call out to an amazing
This is a therapy
feature that we
question.
built. Well, there's that too. So if you think back on a Zoom experience, right? Assume you're recording that and taking that out to a page with 10,000 people watching. The people who are in the green room, the people who are like backstage, so to speak, they can't talk. So they're just sitting there in silence. We built chat initially to handle this so that they could chat with the presenter, but we found that when you chat with the presenters, where do I look? I'm so confused. I have to talk and read, and it was really problematic because it was distracting. So we decided, what if we could find a way to create audio rooms so that the people, the producers, could talk to the people on the stage, much like a TV studio where you have a little squiggly in your ear. And so we've actually built, we call it producer comms, we've patented this, where the producers, which could be the client, it could be a technician, can talk to the people on the stage. And so a lot of the times they're reassuring. You're doing great. There's a ton of engagement on the page. Like, you can really use that technology. And because we have the audio separate from the stuff that's going out to the event page, none of that goes out to what the attendees hear. So it's really powerful. And we strongly encourage that you take advantage of that, because it's really hard to give a presentation, especially if it's 40 minutes and there's no one reacting to it.
What is the attention span online now? Like, how much time is a 40-minute speech or talk like crazy in today's world? Like, what is the attention span, and what is the difference of a virtual attention span versus a live attention span?
So that is a question that we were trying to figure out, and what we've come up with is it's entirely dependent on the quality of the content. We have some events that are an hour long, and the engagement is through the roof, and everyone stays the entire hour. We have others that fall off 20 minutes in, and it has nothing to do with the technology. It has everything to do with the quality of the content. We had a large 4-day event for a very large brand that was focused on diversity and inclusion. And they invited about, I think, 200 people, and 187 of them, or something ridiculous, watched the entire event for 4 days. It was unbelievable. Our general stat, and this is more about RSVPs, and every event is different, so it's tough to paint it with a broad brush. Our general stat is about 50% of the people who RSVP show up. That's generally the rule of thumb. Obviously, it depends on the type of the event, depends on how large the event is, and it depends if that's paid. A paid event has a higher yield rate than an unpaid event. People feel guilty. They feel like they have to show up because they've paid for something. And so just harkening back to the Biden campaign, just as a quick anecdote, when the campaign started, the thesis was we were going to recreate the rope line. As it progressed, 1 month later, they stumbled upon this crazy thing that we could reinvent the fundraiser. And what they did is they asked for people to donate to get access to the exclusive content. By asking people to donate to get access to the event, they felt obligated to show up to the event because they had paid for it. Because they had paid for the event, they showed up. Because they showed up, they gave more money during the event. So it was a really powerful technique. It created higher yields, but it also created a lot of uncertainty for us because we were expecting 50% attendance. I'll give you an example. We were expecting 20,000 people to show up for the Princess Bride script reunion, which happened in September of last year. 20,000 people. we could easily handle 20,000 people. It was no big deal. The day of, Ted Cruz retweets something on Twitter, and 175,000 people showed up to this thing. And we're like, oh my God. We weren't expecting that. It all went off without a hitch, and it was great, but it was really stressful. So sometimes the yields don't actually play out.
So
it's crazy.
Go back to the 4-day event that people stayed and watched. What was the secret sauce of that content? Was it storytelling? Was it like, what was it that made people want to stay that long?
Yeah, in that particular event, there was a nice combination of highly produced broadcasts that felt very pre-recorded because no one really cares, but felt like the content was really rich around the subject matter. In this particular case, it was diversity and inclusion, and more collaborative, smaller, I hate to say breakouts, but smaller sessions with 4 to 12 people on the screen. So that's what we found. A lot of our breakout technology that we're building is very focused on trying to create good connection between 8 and 12 people. That for us, we feel like is the right mix. It's more than 2 or 3, and it's not too many that you can't figure out who's talking. And so what we've designed as part of our Brand Live breakouts, which is, I don't want to give away all of our secrets, but we've designed a way to basically take the Clubhouse style, we call them firesides, and allow 100 or 200 people to watch effectively a breakout session.
It's what I think about what's successful in this new world is the ability to scale intimacy.
Bingo. You want it to feel like a breakout, but you don't want the people who are watching the breakout to be able to make it not intimate. It's exactly what it is. And that's why Clubhouse, I think, as a medium, they're audio only. What I'm describing is video and audio together, but it's the same concept, which is you have a large audience event. You want them to be able to be part of real-time exchanges that are unique and meaningful and different. So not everything is scripted, but you don't want to risk the 80% taking over the 12 people who are talking.
Wow. I must say that we have gone way over what I thought we would talk about, because this is a master class in how it should be done. And Sam, I really appreciate it. And maybe you can wrap up with a comment on what this experience has been for you over the last year. You've gone from this investment banker type person, I know that you've done other things, to actually digging in, and you obviously have the passion for what you're doing. How has this changed you?
So when the pandemic happened, we sent everybody home. And my wife, my Sarah and Ari and Sylvia, we went out to Hood River because we had to get out of the city because people were panicked and it felt like the right thing. And it was nice because I didn't have to be in the kind of city experience. And I had a lot of time to think. We had as I mentioned in the beginning, a tough April. It was like, is this business going to be anything? Like, we weren't expecting to have the success we've had after the terrible April that we had last year, where there was real doubt whether the company might survive. And so having that kind of strife and challenge, I think, makes what happened after feel so, as a CEO, feeling so grateful. And gratitude, I think, is a really important thing to express. And it's hard to do so if you haven't had the low points. I sent every single person home back when the NBA canceled the season. And so we've been building this business almost entirely remotely. Most of the people we've hired, we've interviewed on Zoom. I haven't met most people. I don't know how tall they are. I come into I met a couple of people and they're much taller than I was expecting. And I was like, the joke is short people hire short people, tall people hire tall people. Well, on Zoom, it's a great equalizer. You don't know how tall someone is. One guy was 6'8". I'm really tall, I know. But I think I'll just close on a point on Portland. It hasn't been the easiest year. In addition to the pandemic, we also had a ton of conflict here, first with, I think, very reasonable and appropriate protests, and then that became politicized, and it was really hard. And then in September, we had these terrible fires that shut down the city for 2 weeks. You couldn't walk outside. I have duct tape on my windows that have peeled off the paint because we had to duct tape the windows closed. And so I think, in retrospect, having the requirement to to be resilient, having the requirement to get yourself off the ground, to pick yourself up, like having that experience where we potentially almost ran out of money and being able to figure it out and evolve and do whatever it takes to just keep going. Like that for me is what I'm most grateful for. And what we look in when we hire people, like to have that same kind of resolve, to not have a perfect life, to have some hardship, to have some conflict growing up, to have a very different experience. And I think it's created a better team. It's created one that's more empathetic and able to deal with chaos of a particular meeting or event, which are crazy and they're hard. This is hard stuff. And so I think having the challenges we had in Portland, having the ups and downs and the real struggles helped us as a business become more resilient and hire the right people. It's made all the difference.
I could not agree more. I'm a product of the outward bound world, doing a lot of the outward bound world, and it's the adversity that gives you the confidence, and all the BS sort of slides away. And so I think you should be very proud of what you did. My last question is, how do people find Brand Live and you?
Brandlive.com. Most of our business comes from word of mouth. Most of our business comes from event organizers talking to their friends about how great the experience was. And a big part of our focus is building a magical service team to make sure we're helping you along the way, partnering with you through these moments. And so brandlive.com is the way to find us. And it's something that we're really proud of, but we're hoping to reach out to as many companies as we can and many people as we can to help them make their marquee events that much more different and special and crazy good.
Now that I understand exactly what you do, and it is a very unique selling proposition, I applaud you, and thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks so much, Sam.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the Gather Geeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of Gather Geeks. Until then, gather on.